My name is Amara Wilson, and I'm 28 years old. I'm a high school English teacher in Chicago, Illinois, and right now, I'm standing at the edge of a cliff I never saw coming. Last night, my phone lit up with a text from my brother Tommy. "You're dead to us if you don't help. Mom's about to lose the house." My heart stopped. I haven't spoken to Tommy in months, not since I told my family I was done being their personal bank. But those words, "lose the house," hit like a freight train. I'm sitting in my tiny condo, staring at the $200 in my savings account, my hands trembling as I try to figure out how it came to this. How did I become the villain in my own family story? How did love turn into a debt I can't pay? And what's the secret my mom's been hiding? The one Tommy hinted at in his next text. You don't even know the half of it. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, in a working-class neighborhood where the houses leaned close together, their porches sagging under the weight of time. My mom, Linda, raised me, Tommy, and my younger sister Emily alone after my dad walked out when I was 9. Our house was small, with faded wallpaper and a furnace that groaned in the winter, but it was always full. Cousins sprawled on the couch, aunts gossiping over coffee, uncles shouting at the TV during Bears games. Family wasn't just the people you lived with. It was everyone tied to you by blood, history, or hardship. That's what I was taught. Family comes first, no matter what. But no matter what has a way of breaking you, especially when it's a chain you didn't choose. When I landed my first teaching job 4 years ago at 24, it felt like I'd won the lottery. I'd clawed my way through college on scholarships, part-time jobs at coffee shops, and a mountain of student loans I'm still paying off. Suddenly, I was the one with a steady paycheck, the one who'd made it in a family where most people worked unstable jobs, construction, retail, gig work, or none at all. I was proud to be the first Wilson to graduate college, proud to help out. But that pride came with a cost I didn't see coming. In my family, if you're doing better than everyone else, you're expected to share. They didn't call it anything fancy, not like the black tax I'd later hear about from a colleague, but it was the same idea. If you climb out of the hole, you're supposed to pull everyone else up with you. At first, I embraced it. I wanted to help. I sent my mom $200 a month to cover groceries and utilities. I paid $500 for my cousin Jake's community college tuition so he could finish his associate's degree. When my uncle's car broke down, I chipped in $300 for repairs. It felt good to be the one who could make a difference, to see my mom's relief when the electric bill was paid, to hear Jake talk about his classes with a spark in his eyes. But the requests never stopped. They grew like a wildfire spreading through dry grass, consuming everything in its path. It started small, $50 for a cousin's phone bill, $100 for my aunt's prescription. Then it was school supplies for my other cousins, car insurance for my uncle, contributions to family reunions I couldn't attend because I was grading papers late into the night. Tommy and Emily, both in their early 20s, started treating me like their personal ATM. Tommy needed $400 for a new laptop because his was too old to game on. Emily wanted $200 for clothes to look professional for job interviews that never seemed to lead anywhere. My mom never said no to them, and soon I was expected to say yes to everything. By the time I was 27, I was drowning. My savings account was empty. My dreams, traveling, maybe going to grad school, or just owning a condo, felt like they belonged to someone else's life. I'd missed opportunities, a teaching workshop in New York, a chance to apply for a master's program because I couldn't afford them. I was living paycheck to paycheck, my salary vanishing into other people's lives. I was exhausted, not just physically, but deep in my soul. I loved my family, but their expectations were a noose around my neck, tightening with every request. The breaking point came last December. I was in my tiny rented apartment, a 1-bedroom with thin walls and a leaky faucet, staring at my bank account on my phone. $150 left, 2 weeks until my next paycheck. I just sent $500 for my cousin Sarah's wedding contribution, decorations, because family has to show up big. Then Tommy called, asking for $600 to fix his car. I didn't have it. I told him so, and his response was a scoff. "Come on, Amara," he said. "You're a teacher. You've got money. Don't be stingy." Stingy. The word hit me like a knife, slicing through years of sacrifice. I'd spent my entire adult life putting everyone else first, and now I was stingy? I hung up the phone and cried. Not the quiet tears I'd shed in private before, but loud, angry sobs that shook my whole body. I was 28, and I had nothing to show for it but a teaching degree, a pile of student loan bills, and the family that saw me as a cash machine. The next day, I made a decision that changed everything. I called my mom and told her I was done. I'd help with essentials, her rent, her groceries, but I wasn't covering anyone else's wants anymore. I needed to save for myself, for therapy, for a future I could actually imagine. She didn't say much, just sighed and said, "Okay, Amara, I get it." But I could hear the hurt in her voice, and it tore at me like a fresh wound. The fallout was brutal, a storm I hadn't anticipated. My Aunt Debbie called me a week later, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You think you're too good for us now, don't you? Acting all high and mighty like you're not one of us anymore." I tried to explain that I wasn't abandoning anyone, just setting boundaries, but she hung up before I could finish. Tommy texted me a long rant, calling me selfish, accusing me of forgetting where I came from. Emily stopped talking to me altogether, her silence louder than any words. And my mom cried every time we spoke, her voice soft and pleading, asking why I was pulling away. I felt like the villain in a movie I hadn't signed up for, the traitor who turned her back on her own blood. But I couldn't go back. I'd tasted freedom, just a flicker, and it was intoxicating, a drug I didn't know I needed. The first thing I did was sign up for therapy. It was expensive, $100 a session, but I found a therapist named Dr. Carter who specialized in family dynamics and burnout. In our first session, I spilled everything. The guilt, the pressure, the love I still had for my family despite the resentment boiling inside me. She listened quietly, her pen scratching notes, then asked, "Amara, what do you want for yourself?" I didn't know how to answer. No one had ever asked me that before. I mumbled something about wanting to travel, maybe see Paris or Seattle, but it felt silly saying it out loud, like I was a kid dreaming of impossible things. Dr. Carter smiled, her eyes kind but piercing. "That's a start. Let's figure out what else you want." Therapy became my lifeline, a place where I could untangle the mess of love and obligation that had knotted my life. I learned words like boundaries and self-care, words that felt foreign but necessary, like learning a new language. I started small, saying no to little things, a cousin's request for $50 here, a family barbecue I didn't have the energy for there. Each no felt like a betrayal, but it also felt like breaking a chain, link by link. I opened a savings account, one my family didn't know about, and started putting away $200 a month. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a secret I guarded fiercely. I stopped answering every call from relatives, letting them go to voicemail so I could decide if I had the energy to deal with their requests. I bought myself a new pair of boots, not because I needed them, but because I wanted them. It was the first time I'd spent money on myself without guilt clawing at my chest, whispering that I was selfish. But the guilt was still there, a shadow that followed me everywhere, waiting for a moment of weakness. Every time I saw my mom, she looked at me with those sad eyes, like I was breaking her heart. She'd tell me about Tommy's latest job loss or Emily's struggles, and I'd feel the old pull to fix it all, to be the good daughter who never let her family down. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling of my apartment, wondering if I was wrong, if I was selfish, If I was turning my back on everything I'd been raised to value. One evening, I went to visit my mom at our old house on the south side. The porch still creaked, the kitchen still smelled of her famous meatloaf, a recipe she'd perfected over years of feeding us on a tight budget. We sat down to eat, just the two of us, and for a moment it felt like old times, before the weight of family expectations had crushed me. "Amara," she said, cutting into her meatloaf, her voice heavy, "I know you're trying to live your life, but family is everything. You know how hard it was for me to raise you kids. I didn't do it alone. Your aunts, your uncles, they helped. Now it's your turn." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I'd been paying that debt for years, that I'd given everything I had until I was hollow inside. But instead, I took a deep breath, my hands clenched under the table, and said, "Mom, I love you. I'll always help you with what you need, but I can't carry everyone. I'm not strong enough." She didn't cry this time, but her silence was worse, a heavy, suffocating thing that filled the room. It was like she was waiting for me to cave, to go back to being the good daughter who never said no. I left that night feeling like I'd lost a piece of her, and the ache stayed with me for weeks, a bruise that wouldn't heal. The drama escalated from there, a wildfire that refused to die. Tommy stopped speaking to me after I refused to pay for his car repairs again. Emily sent me a long text accusing me of acting bougie and abandoning the family, her words sharp enough to draw blood. My cousin started whispering about me at family gatherings, calling me the one who thinks she's too good. I stopped going to those gatherings, the weight of their judgment too heavy to bear. It was easier to stay away, to build a wall between me and the family I loved but couldn't save. But I was also starting to see glimmers of the life I wanted, faint but growing brighter. I kept up with therapy, and Dr. Carter helped me navigate the guilt that threatened to pull me under. I started researching condos, dreaming of a place that was mine alone. No family dropping by unannounced, no expectations waiting at the door like uninvited guests. I even bought a cheap plane ticket to New Orleans for a weekend getaway, my first real trip just for me. Standing in the French Quarter, listening to jazz and eating beignets, the warm air wrapping around me like a hug, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom, pure and untainted. Then came the wedding, a storm that nearly broke me. My cousin Sarah, the one I'd already contributed $500 to, was getting married in a big ceremony at a downtown venue, all glitz and glamour. The family expected me to chip in again, this time $800 for the catering. I said no. It was the hardest no I'd ever said, like ripping a bandage off a wound that hadn't healed. Sarah called me herself, her voice dripping with venom, sharp enough to cut through steel. "So, Amara, you're too good for my wedding now? You think you're above us?" "I'm not above anyone," I said, my voice shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. "I just can't afford it. I'm trying to build my own life." She laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in my ears long after the call ended. "Your own life? What about ours? You owe us, Amara. You wouldn't be where you are without family." I hung up, my hands trembling, and cried until my throat was raw, the tears soaking my pillow. But I didn't change my mind. I didn't send the money. Instead, I put it into my savings account and booked another therapy session. I was done letting guilt run my life, even if it meant losing the family I loved. The real test came 6 months later, when my mom called in a panic, her voice trembling through the phone. Tommy had been in a car accident, not serious, but his car was totaled, and he needed $2,000 for a new one. He didn't have insurance because Tommy never planned ahead, always living for the moment. My mom begged me to help. "He's your brother, Amara. He's struggling. We all are." I wanted to say yes. Every part of me screamed to fix it, to make my mom stop crying, to be the good sister who always came through. But I thought about my savings, my plans, the life I was trying to build from the ashes of my sacrifices. I thought about all the times I'd said yes and ended up with nothing but resentment. So I said, "Mom, I can't. I'll help with his medical bills if he needs it, but I can't buy him a car. He needs to figure this out." She didn't speak to me for a month. It was the longest we'd ever gone without talking, and it felt like a piece of my heart had been carved out, leaving a raw, bleeding hole. But I kept going. I kept saving, kept going to therapy, kept saying no when I needed to. And slowly, things started to shift, like the first rays of dawn after a long, dark night. Emily got a job. Not a great one, just a retail gig at a mall, but it was a start, a step toward independence. Tommy started driving for a ride-sharing app, grumbling but surviving, his pride dented but intact. My mom stopped asking for money every week, and when we did talk, it was about small things, her garden, my students' latest antics, the weather. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, a fragile bridge between us. A year after I said my first big no, I moved into my own condo. It was small, just a one-bedroom in a modest part of Chicago, but it was mine, a sanctuary I'd built with my own hands. I painted the walls a soft gray, hung up photos from my New Orleans trip, and bought a couch that didn't smell like someone else's life. For the first time, I had a space that was just for me, a place where I could breathe. I invited my mom over for dinner to celebrate, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. She walked around the condo, touching the walls, smiling at the photos, her fingers lingering on a picture of me in the French Quarter, laughing in the sunlight. "You did this, Amara," she said, her voice thick with something I hadn't heard in years, pride. "You did this on your own." We ate meatloaf and mashed potatoes, just like old times, and talked about everything and nothing. She didn't ask for money, and I didn't feel the weight of expectation pressing down on me. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough, a moment of peace in a war I'd been fighting for years. But the peace didn't last. A few weeks later, I got that text from Tommy about my mom losing the house, and the world tilted under my feet. My stomach dropped as I read his words again. "You're dead to us if you don't help. Mom's about to lose the house." And then the second text, the one that sent a chill down my spine. "You don't even know the half of it." What did that mean? What wasn't my mom telling me? I called her immediately, my heart racing, my fingers fumbling with the phone. "Mom, what's going on? Tommy said the house is at risk." Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying for days. "The mortgage, we're behind. I didn't want to tell you, Amara. I know you're trying to live your life. But they're saying they'll foreclose if we don't pay $5,000 by next month." $5,000. More than I had in my savings. More than I could scrape together without wiping out everything I'd worked for. I felt the old pull, the one that said family comes first, no matter what. But I also felt something new, a resolve, hard and unyielding, to protect the life I'd started to build. "Mom, I need to think about this," I said, my voice barely steady, my mind a whirlwind of fear and anger. "I'll call you tomorrow." I hung up and sat on my couch, my mind spinning like a top. Part of me wanted to empty my savings, to save the house that held my childhood, my mom's sacrifices, our memories, the creaky porch, the kitchen table where we'd laughed and cried, the backyard where I'd learned to ride a bike. But another part of me, the part that had learned to say no, knew that giving everything would mean going back to square one. I'd be broke again, trapped in the same cycle of obligation and resentment, a hamster on a wheel that never stopped. I called Dr. Carter the next morning, my hands shaking as I dialed, my voice breaking as I explained the situation. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, tears streaming down my face. "If I don't help, my mom could lose her home. But if I do, I lose everything I've built." Dr. Carter's voice was calm, a lifeline in the storm. "Amara, this is a big moment. You're not just deciding about money, you're deciding who you're going to be. Can you help in a way that doesn't erase your progress? Her words stuck with me, a beacon in the fog. I spent the next week researching options, mortgage assistance programs, legal aid, even crowdfunding platforms I'd never considered before. I called my mom and offered to help her apply for a hardship program through the bank. I even sent $500 to cover 1 month's payment, the most I could afford without breaking myself. But I told her I couldn't pay the full $5,000. You need to talk to Tommy and Emily, I said, my voice firm despite the lump in my throat. They live with you. They need to step up too. She cried, and I hated myself for it, the guilt like a knife twisting in my gut. But I held firm, clinging to the boundaries I'd fought so hard to set. The next day, Tommy showed up at my condo unannounced, his face twisted with anger, his fists clenched at his sides. "You're really gonna let Mom lose the house?" he shouted, pacing my living room like a caged animal. "You've got this fancy place, and you can't even help your own family?" "It's not about that," I shot back, my voice rising, my own anger bubbling over. "I've been helping for years, Tommy, years. I'm done being the only one who carries this family." He stared at me, his eyes hard, his jaw tight. "You've changed, Amara. You're not the sister I used to know, and you don't even know what's really going on." There it was again, that hint of a secret, a shadow lurking behind his words. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my heart pounding. "What don't I know?" He shook his head, his expression a mix of anger and something else. Guilt, maybe? "Ask Mom," he said, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard my photos rattled on the wall. I sat there, stunned, my mind racing. What was my mom hiding? Was it just the mortgage, or was there something bigger, something that could explain why the family leaned on me so hard? I called her again, my voice sharper this time. "Mom, what's going on? Tommy keeps saying there's something I don't know. You need to tell me the truth." There was a long pause, so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Amara, it's your dad." My dad? The man who'd walked out when I was 9, leaving us with nothing but a hole where his presence used to be. "What about him?" I asked, my throat tight. "He's back," she said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "He's been back for a year, living nearby. He's sick, Amara. Cancer. He's got no money, no insurance. I've been helping him, using the mortgage money. That's why we're behind." The world tilted again, and I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. My dad, the man who'd abandoned us, was back, and my mom was risking her home to help him? "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "I didn't want you to know," she said. "You were so hurt when he left. I thought I could handle it." I hung up, my head spinning, my heart a mess of anger, betrayal, and something I couldn't name. My dad was back, and my family had kept it from me, all while expecting me to keep bailing them out. I didn't know what to do with that. The next few weeks were a nightmare, a whirlwind of emotions I could barely process. I kept helping my mom with the mortgage assistance process, calling legal aid, filling out forms, my hands shaking with every step. I sent another $500, but I drew the line there. I wasn't going to pay for my dad's mistakes, not after he'd left us to fend for ourselves. Tommy and Emily grudgingly agreed to contribute to the mortgage, their resentment palpable in every text and call. "You forced us into this," Emily said once, her voice cold as ice. "If you'd just paid, we wouldn't be scraping by like this." I wanted to scream that I'd been scraping by for years because of them, but I bit my tongue, my jaw aching from the effort. I was learning to pick my battles, to save my energy for the fights that mattered. Through it all, I leaned on Dr. Carter, pouring out the betrayal I felt about my dad's return, the anger at my mom's secrecy, the guilt that still gnawed at me. "You're not just fighting for your money," she said during one session, her voice steady. "You're fighting for your identity. That's why this feels so hard." She was right. Every no was a declaration of who I was becoming, a woman who loved her family but refused to let their needs define her. But the revelation about my dad added a new layer of complexity, a wound I hadn't realized was still raw. I hadn't seen him in nearly 20 years, and now he was back, sick and desperate, pulling my mom into his orbit. I didn't know if I wanted to see him, to confront him, or to pretend he didn't exist. I focused on what I could control. The mortgage crisis eased when the bank granted a temporary forbearance, thanks to the legal aid organization I'd found. My mom started working extra shifts at her job, and Tommy and Emily contributed enough to keep the payments going. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it bought time, a fragile lifeline in a sea of chaos. The drama didn't end there. A few months later, my Uncle Mike called, his voice heavy with desperation. He'd been diagnosed with diabetes and needed $1,500 for medical bills. I felt the familiar tug, the one that said family comes first, but I'd learned my lesson. I offered to help him find low-cost clinics and payment plans, but I didn't open my wallet. "I can't keep doing this, Uncle Mike," I said, my voice steady despite the guilt. "I'll support you, but I can't pay for everything." He didn't yell, which surprised me. Instead, he said, "I get it, Amara. I didn't know who else to call." That broke my heart, but it also strengthened my resolve. I was done being the family safety net, the one who always said yes. I started building my life with intention, saying yes to things that were just for me. I joined a hiking group, finding solace in the quiet of the trails outside Chicago, the crunch of leaves under my boots a reminder that I was moving forward. I took a second trip, this time to Seattle, where I walked through Pike Place Market, watched fish fly through the air, and stood at the edge of Puget Sound, feeling small but alive. I started applying to grad schools, dreaming of a master's in education that could open new doors, a future that was mine to shape. I even joined a book club with colleagues, laughing over novels and wine, feeling like I was part of something that didn't demand my wallet. But the shadow of my family's expectations never fully left, and my dad's return loomed like a storm cloud. I hadn't decided what to do about him, whether to see him or keep him at a distance. Then, one evening, my mom called, her voice trembling again. "Amara, your dad, he wants to see you. He's not doing well. He's asking for you." My heart stopped. The man who'd abandoned us, who'd left us to struggle, wanted to see me now? "I don't know if I can," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need time." She didn't push, but I could hear the weight of her disappointment. The next day, I found a letter in my mailbox, handwritten, the address scrawled in a shaky hand. It was from him, my dad. I stood in my condo, the letter trembling in my hands, unsure if I wanted to open it. When I finally did, the words blurred through my tears. "Amara," it read, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I left because I was weak, because I couldn't handle the pressure. I'm sorry. I'm sick now, and I don't have much time. I just want to see you, to tell you I'm proud of who you've become." Proud? The word felt like a slap. He hadn't been there for any of it, and now he was proud? I threw the letter across the room, my chest heaving with anger, but I couldn't stop rereading it in my mind. I brought it to therapy, and Dr. Carter listened as I raged, cried, and raged again. "You don't have to decide anything right now," she said. "You can choose what feels right for you, not for him or your mom or anyone else." It was a revelation, the idea that I could choose. I didn't see my dad right away. I needed time to process, to figure out what I wanted from a man who'd been a ghost for most of my life. Meanwhile, the family drama kept churning. My cousin Jake, who'd finished his degree with my help, started asking for money again, this time for a new suit for job interviews. I offered to help him find affordable options, but he brushed me off. "You've got the money, Amara," he said. "Why make it complicated?" I didn't argue. I just said no and changed the subject. It was getting easier to say no, but it still hurt, like a muscle I was training but hadn't fully strengthened. The biggest shock came a year later, when Tommy showed up at my door again, his face pale, his eyes haunted. "I messed up, Amara," he said, his voice raw, barely holding together. "I got into some bad stuff. Gambling, debts. I owe $3,000, and they're coming for me if I don't pay." My heart sank, fear mixing with frustration. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about his safety, maybe his life. I felt the old pull, but I also felt the weight of everything I'd built. My condo, my savings, my dreams. I couldn't give him $3,000, but I couldn't abandon him either. "I'll help you figure this out," I said, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "But I'm not paying it. We'll find a way, together." We spent the next week calling debt counselors, setting up a payment plan, and getting Tommy into a support group for gambling addiction. It was exhausting, emotionally and physically, but it was the first time I felt like I was helping without losing myself. I even met with the debt collector, a scary guy named Vinny who looked like he'd stepped out of a mob movie. I stood my ground, negotiating a payment plan that Tommy could manage with his ride-sharing gig. It wasn't easy, but it was a victory, a sign that I could support my family without sacrificing everything. Emily got a promotion at her retail job and started talking to me again, mostly about her new boyfriend and her plans to move out of Mom's house. My mom kept up with her accounting course, and I saw a spark in her I hadn't seen since I was a kid, a glimmer of the woman she'd been before life wore her down. The family wasn't fixed. There were still fights, still whispers, still moments when I felt like an outsider in my own bloodline. But it was changing, slowly, like a river carving a new path. I finally decided to see my dad. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step. I met him at a coffee shop, a frail man with gray hair and eyes that looked too much like mine. He didn't ask for money, didn't make excuses. He just said, "I'm sorry, Amara. I was a coward. I'm proud of you, even if I don't have the right to be." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, my throat tight. We talked for an hour, awkward and stilted, but it was something. I didn't know if I'd see him again, but I left feeling lighter, like I'd let go of a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. Last month, I went to a family reunion, the first in 2 years. I braced for the worst, expecting the usual whispers and glares, but something had shifted. My cousins asked about my grad school applications, curious instead of judgmental. Aunt Debbie hugged me, a real hug, not the stiff ones she used to give. Tommy cracked a joke about my hiking boots, calling me Miss Nature, and I laughed, the sound surprising me. My mom pulled me aside as the sun set, her eyes bright with hope. "You're doing good, Amara," she said, squeezing my hand. "You're showing us how to live, not just survive." I didn't cry, but I came close, my heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. We stood there, watching the sunset over the backyard, the laughter of our family filling the air. For the first time, I felt like I belonged, not as the one who paid for everything, but as Amara, the sister, the daughter, the woman who was finally free to be herself. I'm still learning what that means, still navigating the balance between love and boundaries. Some days, the guilt creeps back, whispering that I'm selfish, that I'm letting my family down. But I've learned to listen to a new voice, one that's quieter but growing stronger. It's the voice that says I deserve a life of my own, that love doesn't have to mean sacrifice, that I can be part of my family without being consumed by it. I don't know where this path will lead, maybe to Paris, maybe just to the next trail outside Chicago. But I'm excited to find out, one step at a time.